In this video, we are going to look at how to find the angle between two vectors. So you can think about if I had one vector, say this was vector v, and we had another vector, say going this way, which was vector u, I can find this angle theta in between them. And there's a nice little formula that relates them all, and it is that the cosine of theta is equal to vector u dotted with vector v divided by the length of u times the length of v. So, for example, find the angle between the vectors. So A, we're looking at -7, 6 and -8, -1. Okay, so I need to calculate these different pieces here. So for the top, we're going to need u dot v, so it's going to be our two vectors dotted together. So -7, 6 dotted with -8, -1. So if we do that, it's going to be -7 times -8 plus 6 times -1, and that turns out to be 50. We're going to need the length of the vector -7, 6. So that's going to end up being the square root of -7 squared plus 6 squared, or the square root of 85. We need the length of the vector -8, -1. So that's going to be the square root of -8 squared plus -1 squared, which ends up being the square root of 65. And so now, if we put these into our formula, we have that the cosine of theta is equal to, so u dot v we said was 50, divided by square root of 85 times the square root of 65, which means theta is going to be the inverse cosine, so we take the inverse to get back to theta, of 50 divided by square root of 85, square root of 65. And if you punch that into your calculator, you end up with 47.7263 ... And the problems on Alex ask you to round to the nearest degree, so this would be rounded to 48 degrees. So we'll try one more. So let's look at between -3, 1 and -8, -2. So remember our formula, cosine theta is u dot v divided by the length of u, times the length of v. Okay, so if I dot these two, -3, 1 dotted with -8, -2, that's going to be -3 times -8 plus 1 times -2, which ends up being 22. If we find the length of -3, 1, that's going to be the square root of -3 squared plus 1 squared. So that's going to be, way too long. Square root of 9 plus 1 is 10. If we find the length of -8, -2, it's going to be the square root of -8 squared plus -2 squared, which is going to be the square root of 64 plus 4, so 68. So now we're looking at the cosine of theta is equal to u dot v, so 22 divided by square root of 10, square root of 68. So theta is going to be the inverse cosine of 22 over square root of 10, square root of 68. So that's going to be equal to, punch it in here, 32.4711 dot dot dot. And if we round to the nearest degree, it's going to be 32 degrees. So it's just really a matter of plugging into this formula.